Welcome to Fight the Burnout. Another great episode coming along for you. Remember, we are here to help police and first responders to get tools, strategies, and tips from either active duty or retired police officers so that you can learn what people wish they had known in the beginning of their career so that you don't end up burned out. We're seeing it so much these days of officers burning out, getting PTSD, and leaving the job that they love, and we don't want that. So today, without further ado, we've got Dave Maxx here with us from Chicago. He was a police officer there, and he's retired out 25 years in. So he's going to give us some really good tips and strategies today, and we'll dig deep into things. But before we start, I want you to make sure if you're driving in the car, perk up those ears, listen, but pay attention to the road, of course. Stay safe. But also, just take one thing away from today. We are in an information world. We've got AI, we've got Google, we've got all these different things that we can find information, but what we're lacking is actually taking action on that information. So just take one thing, implement it every day for the next 365 days, and you'll be further ahead than you can ever imagine. So without further ado, Dave, why don't you take it away? Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us your background, and then we'll dive straight into it.
Man, thanks a lot for having me. First of all, Chris, I am a retired police officer, happily retired, about 5 months now. I did 25 years, most of that in patrol. Um, I enjoyed patrol. People ask, what about promotions and all that kind of stuff? Um, as we all know, police departments can be a really political place at times, which can be stressful. But I enjoyed patrol. And when I decided to become a police officer, the main motivation for me, like a lot of cops, is I wanted to help people. I wanted to be of service. I wanted to find ways to impact the community in incredible ways that I didn't think everybody else was going to do. And of course, I wanted to be that image and that role model that encouraged other people to want to get involved and be a catalyst for up. What's the word I want to use? A catalyst for not just change, but transformation and picking up their communities and pushing people forward to feel safer, to be safer, and to have better relationships. So one of my big things was to try to help people understand the police and how to interact with them better so that we can better serve them. Because the truth is we are public servants, and I embrace that role. And I thought the best way to do that was in patrol. I did leave patrol for a short period of time to go work in community relations and interact in schools and what have you. But for the most part, patrol was where I did most of my work. And it's heavy work. You have those days where you're constantly going from 1 to 10. But I enjoyed it. Luckily I had a family that was really supportive, and things worked out. But I'm glad to have gotten to a point where I was able to retire rather than being pushed out or being in a place where I felt that I had to leave to do something different, because it's rough. A lot of people don't understand what first responders really do, what we go through, what we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And just happy to have served and been a part of the process.
I love that, man. And thanks for that service. And I'm glad that you made it to that 25 years because it's we're not seeing it very often in the newer guys. They're leaving pretty quick because of burnout, trauma, stress.
Definitely.
The pressure that's not just put on them by the departments, but also by the public and the media and everything, especially after the last few years. And I'd love, which, tell me now if you don't want to talk about it, but I'd love to talk about, Chicago and during the riots and all the different stuff. If you got involved in any of that stuff and how you were able to get through that, because I know that was majorly stressful. I've got friends that lived in downtown Chicago that were above shops that were getting broken into and stuff. So
yeah, it was a rough time.
Yeah, there were very rough times. Even over here, it was like watching it, I was like, holy cow. But let's start off with, what was the reason? Well, actually, I like to ask this question.
Okay.
What's your definition of burnout, Dave? Like, what do you define burnout as?
Overstressed, or mismanagement of stress. Um, when the pressure gets to a point where you find yourself in a place where you're also contributing to your own trauma besides the things that we see on a regular basis, and it makes it a little bit more difficult to deal with. I don't think that that's, because some guys may think that that's a place of weakness, and it's not. I mean, if you really think about the things that we deal with every day, I mean, it's not stuff you go running home telling your wife and kids about. You have your moments, you have those few stories you can share with your friends or whatever. But you don't usually want to transfer that to somebody else. Not only that, if you think about it, every call, depending on who your dispatcher is that day, you're constantly going from 0 to 10, and you're the only one who really knows what's going on there. They got the call, but who knows what that person said or didn't say? I mean, just as well as I do, most of the calls you get to, once you get there, it's not what the call came out as. So you're constantly dealing with all of this 0 to 10, 0 to 10. You got to come down off 10. And that might be 10, 15 times in one day. That's a lot for someone to handle. And so it's like a pressure cooker. You keep, using it and beating it up. Over time, that pressure cooker may not be able to really continue to handle the stress at the same level. And I just think, you get to a point where enough is enough, kind of. And it's just, it's better to let it go than to continue to push yourself toward a place that may put you in some mental positions that you may not be able to have the chance to be you. And so for me, burnout is when pressure gets to a level where I'm not able to be me.
I love that. Do you have a time, Dave, where you actually you got to that stage where you weren't you and you were starting to burn out? Obviously, doing patrol for 25 years or more or less, you're going to have some incidents. Is there any that kind of jump to mind that, maybe somebody can relate to and be like, hey, wait a second, that's actually me as well?
You know what? I think whenever you have rule changes or you have the media campaigns that kind of give you the impression that you're the bad guy, I think whenever that happens, it pushes you to that place when you're thinking, damn, I'm here to help. But, there's so many people or so many institutions that are looking for opportunities to say that I'm not doing a good job or that the job I'm doing has ulterior motives. And the reality is, more times than not, and I'm discounting, do some police officers have sideways personal opinions or what have you? Yeah. But just being human beings, a lot of times, even when those personality traits or opinions are in play, they don't impact the job we're doing. Because at that time, we're human beings trying to make things happen and trying to help people get things done. And so when you're dealing with that on a regular basis, and then sometimes the bosses kind of seem like they're piling on right along with that, or they're, catering, to things that aren't necessarily happening in your opinion. I think those are the times that I think of where the burnout hits, because it happens over and over and over. If it was just, something that was time to time, I get it, but it happens a lot more, at least than the public knows of.
I was gonna say, in 25 years, you would have gone through a lot of those cycles of up and downs.
And downs. You bosses change, ideas about what policing is changes. The media comes out with politicians, our greatest friends. And that's sarcasm totally. They come up with these things that aren't realistic, because I don't think that a lot of people who call the shots for law enforcement really understand what law enforcement is or what it takes to actually do that job. And if they would take the time, go out there with them, I mean, if it's such an easy job and, you know, it doesn't take that much to do it, bring your happy ass out there and do it with us. You know,
Yeah, you don't see many of them doing it, do you?
no, no, or at least ask our opinion. I mean, think about it. Most police officers would tell you things change, but no one asked us. The guys who are on the front line usually don't get asked.
Yeah.
And that's an important thing that needs to be considered. I understand everybody's not a boss or everybody's not a supervisor, but that doesn't mean we don't have leadership qualities or that we don't understand the people who we interact with on a daily basis.
Well, you
We got
think
to be
about it.
respected as well.
You think about it as even a patrol officer, which is kind of the on the scale, the ladder scale. It's kind of the bottom level, but they're like the infantry, which actually holds everything up.
Definitely.
They hold
Definitely.
if you don't have your good patrol and infantry, you're
Definitely.
pretty screwed.
Yeah.
But all of us as patrol
Mm-hmm.
have to have leadership qualities because we literally,
Yes.
I recognize this hard
Yes.
once I got out of the police, and I'm passionate about sales and that as well as it's what I do for business. And when you think about it, as officers, we are some of the greatest leaders and salespeople in the world because you are trying to get people who just did a massive crime and know that they did to do what you want them to do without having to use force. Because if you use force, the amount of paperwork is just, you don't want to.
Yes.
Plus, also, then you have, like, especially in recent days, you have all the, legality and all of that side of stuff that is getting thrown at you so easily.
Yes.
We are great leaders. We lead people to do what we need them to do to get a good outcome. And so when you say asking what you want, like I've interviewed 160, I think it is, people on this podcast so far.
Yep.
And about 60 of those, 80 of those are law enforcement or first responders, and a lot of chiefs of police. I've had a lot of chiefs, lieutenants, deputy chiefs, and the biggest thing that they do is they ask their staff at the very bottom of the ladder, how are things going? What do you need? They go out, they patrol with them, they look at them, they turn up to jobs with them to see what they're doing, not to scrutinize them, but to actually see what's going on, see what they need. So that they can then look at how do we implement what they need so that we are actually supported. They think of it from the bottom up kind of thing instead of from the top down. And so it's so true. I love that thought. I mean, I had some commissioners here in New Zealand that I never had one to come ride along with me, but they'd come out to the street and their security team hated it because they'd go out and they'd put on the vest and they'd put on the appointments and they'd go and they'd turn up to jobs and they'd, turn up to the lineup and, actually go out with the teams and attend jobs. And ask the troops, what is it that's going on? Like, what are you having going on at this front line? So I love that. Now, obviously, you've gone through a lot of these cycles of ups and downs in that. Being patrol and, feeling, it sounds like a lot of times, as I felt as well, we don't really have a say. Nobody really listens to us half the time.
Right.
What did you do? Like, what would be the key 3 things that you did to make sure that you still loved it so you didn't get into that nasty stage of burnout, get affected by all the trauma, get nailed by it all, and then actually become that cynical, nasty cop? Because it doesn't sound like you are. I mean, 5 months out, you'd kind of be able to tell if you were, if you were or not, and not become that cop that, is like, I'm doing this job. I've got 5 years left and I've got to just punch through it. And then to get how did you do it? What would be the 3 things that you would give to newer officers or even current officers that have been in a while to counteract and not get nailed by, the burnout demon?
One of the main things, and it may seem kind of weird, but one of the main things that I would do from time to time, be friendly to a kid. And I mean, it sounds like, what difference does that make, right? The reality is, if you can find the feeling, the kid in yourself, to speak to a kid and see that kid's response to you, that can be one of the most encouraging things ever. Fortunately, because I had seniority a lot of the time, the beat that I chose to work on, the senior guy gets to pick. I will always work the beat that had a school in it. And from time to time, I get out of the car, which, a lot of us don't like to do. Get out of the car, walk into schools, get out of the car, walk into businesses, and have a conversation that doesn't have anything to do with a call. Allow yourself to be in a space for people to receive you with appreciation, with kindness, or just as a person, not necessarily a person in a uniform. But kids, can give you that reassurance that what you're doing has real value. A lot of times the way that adults don't. I know sometimes we get out of the car, we go in restaurants and we get that look of despise because, somebody got a ticket or they remember, some sort of interaction that because they didn't want to be the person who was in the wrong at the time, they remember that. But if we allow ourselves that space to where we can be childlike, I think that's a good thing. The second thing is remember all the time why you do this. Most of us don't like working out because it hurts, right? But there's value in it, right? And so if you remember the real reason why you became a police officer and the impact that you could have on your community, even if it's just one person, even if it's a little old lady who's used to you driving by at the same time, waving at them, remember that's why you're there. Excuse me. And the last thing is everybody can't do what you do. Realize that. I mean, I used to say that we're sin eaters. We don't see people most of the time, you see people at their worst. And so you're constantly ingesting that, which of course increases your stress level. But the fact that you saw enough purpose in yourself to be willing to accept that role. Remember, there's a lot of people who would blow or who would make the wrong decision on how to solve some of those situations or not be able to come up with solutions at all. You were the person who had some ideas. They don't have to be the greatest ideas. You just have one or two things that work. And when you do a good job, don't wait for somebody else to pat you on the back. Pat yourself on the back. Even if it's a simple call, pat yourself on the back. It's a good call. And go from there. And that's, for me, that's what gave me a lot of satisfaction, because your bosses don't know until they come down there and see. One of my commanders came in one day. He was like, "This entire community knows you. Thank you for making my job easier. I didn't even know the things you did down here. They told me at the last community meeting." I was like, "It's what I do. It's why I'm here." And so, but I didn't need him to do it because I did it for myself. You got to be willing to pat yourself on the back. That's three of them, I guess, that work for me.
No, I love that. It's so important. I love the be friendly to a kid. I've never thought about that. And that's the first time I've heard that, because it's so true. When you're talking with a kid in a friendly manner, you can't be angry. You can't be like, especially if they're there and they're loving you and they're like, you walk into a school and most schools will, especially kids, like I take it you're talking like preteen kind of things as well.
Oh yeah. Like, once you're a cop, you hate high school kids.
yeah. Like preteen thing. The kids love you. Like I remember being a buddy of mine still like I've still got quite a lot of friends that are still in the police. And one of my friends came around in his patrol car, and parked up in our laneway, and the kids like across the laneway from us, I had him come around specifically for them, and they're absolutely loving it. They got to turn the lights on and the sirens.
Oh, I do that all the time.
They just absolutely love it. And it's like, I remember being in a patrol car, and you see those kids and they'd wave at you and you wave them back. And you instantly feel good. So I love that. And remembering that you're remembering all the time the why. It's one of the things that I teach.
Got to start with why.
Yeah, it's that I teach aspiring and I teach current police so much. It's all about the why, because if you are locked into a really solid why that doesn't have any foo-foo, and you know where it comes from and it's yours and it's nobody else's, beyond in a deeper way of then I just want to help people, because you can go help people by walking down to the local shelter and giving out food.
Yep.
Something deeper than that. Like mine is to create less pain. And so everything
Yeah.
that I do, I look to create less
Yeah.
pain and to help people be seen. And so
Yes.
if you can do that, and if I had known that deep level when I was a cop and stayed focused on it and kept it at
Yeah.
the forefront of the brain, holy crap, my policing career would have
Yeah.
been different. And I probably would have been sitting like you 25 years
Yeah.
in going, this is the best job ever. So I love that. And
Yeah.
then your third one, not everybody can do this job. I use that one a
Yeah.
lot these days since I got out.
Yeah.
And I'm reiterating these for everybody out there just to remind you that even once you get out, you've got to still use these same things because of the demons and the
Yes.
traumas and the all the past stuff doesn't just leave because you put the badge down, because you take the uniform off. They're all still there. Those jobs, those nasty jobs late at night, really hard ones, they still come with you. I can still remember things vividly of those. Yet I
Yeah.
can't remember other things because of the burnout and because of the stresses of it. But
Yeah.
remembering not everybody can do your job. I've had multiple
Mhm.
in my life, I've had multiple people swear at me and stuff like that since leaving the job. I've had taken complaint calls and stuff for different companies that I work for. And
Yeah.
everybody's like, how do you deal with it? How are you so calm? I'm like,
Exactly.
not everybody can do. Well, it's not so much around, I think that not everybody can do this, but it's like perspective. They don't
Exactly.
have a gun to my head.
Exactly. Exactly.
I've had guns pulled
Exactly.
on me. I've had knives pulled on me. I've had people try and take me to
Yep.
the ground and beat me up. They're on the
Yep.
other side of the phone, man. Like, this is easy compared to what I used to do.
Exactly.
So, remember
Exactly.
that, this job isn't for everybody and it takes a
Yeah.
calling, as we hear all the time. So I love that.
Yeah.
I'd love to know, Dave, how did you during your 25 years, because that's a lot of traumatic jobs. I mean, there's stats that came out of New York quite a few years
Yeah.
ago that say that, a police officer will see 18 times as much trauma in their first 12 months as a civilian their entire life.
Yeah.
You just did 25 times, 25 lives at 18
Yeah.
times.
Yeah.
I can't even do
It's
that math.
it's
How did you stay
it's wild to
focused?
even think about.
It is. It's crazy to think about.
Yeah.
And you did some stuff. I know we've talked before this episode. We talked about how
Mm.
you actually, ended up putting your hand up and you worked in a lot of the roughest places in
Yeah.
Chicago and that with the
Yeah.
department that you work for. How did you keep those alive? Like, I know you probably went through some stages where it was dark times and got yourself back out,
Yeah.
but how did you get yourself back out and stay focused on those three things of, be friendly with a kid, remember, staying focused on that why, because it can be lost easily if you don't stay vigilant on it. And
Right.
everybody can't do the job. How did you keep those alive for 25 years?
A couple of things. Number one, I was determined to go home every day. And that wasn't predicated on someone else, what they did, how they felt, or what have you. A minute ago, you mentioned something that's super, super, super important for police officers, or any first responder to understand. A lot of times, people just need to be seen, right? That's huge, right? And so, a lot of times, when I would go to calls, that was my first job. How do I help this person to feel like I see them or that I respect them? Not that I'm there for them to respect me, what I say, or my authority, right? Not to come and make a determination. Sometimes you go to a call, the deal when you get there. If you're going to lock somebody up, who that person is probably going to be. It rarely changes, though sometimes it does, right? And so even in those cases, my job was to make everyone there feel like I cared about what they had to say and how they felt in that moment, right? Now, that doesn't mean I wasn't going to be an authority or in a position of telling people how this was going to go, right? But it did mean that I had to ask questions. It did mean that I had to be willing to not be the champion winning this entire thing, right? Because we got an end goal, and that's what we're trying to get to. And so sometimes you got to take a step back to get the 2 steps forward. And I know that sounds real cliche-ish, but the reality is you ain't there to save face. You're there to get a job done. And sometimes making someone else feel like they're somewhat in control of themselves in that moment is all they really, really need. And so all of those years, I mean, when I work with newer officers, their big thing was when you get to a call, why do you start it so calmly? And so my thing is, it's already hit the fan. The least I can do is take some of the pressure off the pot, and by doing that, I allow myself to not be on 10 the entire time I'm standing there. That doesn't mean I get relaxed. It doesn't mean I trust people in the moment. We all know those are dangerous things,
It creates that complacency, which
Oh yeah.
complacency kills.
Man, complacency kills, right? And so you're there remembering why you're there, but give them that olive leaf, to let them know, at least for a minute, I'm going to let you feel your humanity. You're going to do it under control. You're going to do it by my rules. But by the same token, I need to give you space to at least feel like this is a guy, even if he's going to put handcuffs on me, that I think he's going to be fair with me. And I think that's all that a human being is really expecting. That alone made my tenure a whole lot easier than it could have been. I mean, I could have been the guy running in, grabbing people, throwing people on the ground, putting cuffs on, and then, oh, I'm sorry, taking cuffs off. And now I really got a fight on my hands. And so I think a big part of it is just realizing you have to identify with people. Yeah, we're cops. And we have this training and we've been entrusted to do all these things. It don't hurt you to identify with someone, even if their life could be a bowl full of boo-boo, right? But the reality is, be human enough, have enough empathy to identify with them. Because the truth is, that could be you or anybody in your family. There's just one or two things that didn't happen to put you or them in that situation. Act like it. And I think you take, like I said, you take pressure off yourself and you give people the opportunity to really interact with you and not just see your uniform. That's important.
Come from a place of compassion instead of a place of significance
definitely.
or ego.
Definitely. You got to lose the ego. I get it. Don't get me wrong. I mean, there are times when, there's some people you got to cuss at, you got to yell at, because that's what they understand, right? That ain't everybody.
No, it's not. The little old lady that walked is not
you know what I mean? But you got some guys, they're on 10 and everybody they're interacting with, they're the cop that's on TV. Dude, this is real life. So, have a little empathy and give people space to be human.
I love that, man. Thanks, Dave, for that. I had a question. I'll jump to this question, or that one will pop back up, and then I'd love to talk to you about Chicago in the last, kind of, because it just kind of intrigues me, but also I know there's a lot of learnings that came out of the last kind of 4-ish years, especially in that area. What is your why, Dave? Like, beyond that, I want to help people. What is your why? Have you identified it? Like, what's drawing you through the whole job the entire time, and even childhood, and led you to where you are now? Like, what's the why that keeps you going?
When I first started the job, like a lot of guys, that salary really kind of piques your interest, right?
And then you realize it doesn't go up very fast.
Yeah. It's not what you thought it was, right?
Yeah. You're like, oh yeah, I can start on that 70K, and then you're like, wait a second, I'm gonna still be in the 70s 10 years later.
Exactly, right? So it's weird. When I first did that, I had a side story to kind of get to it.
Yeah.
When I first met my wife, when you're a cop, you don't come out and tell everybody you're a cop and all that other stuff, right? Because they start acting weird.
Yeah.
right?
They either
So
love you
when
or they hate you. There's not really an
right, you know,
in-between.
right, you know, and so, you know, you're trying to play it safe. And so a lot of people don't know me as a police officer, right? So in the 25 years that I've been a police officer, you know, had social media and all that other kind of stuff, right? I've never posted a picture of me being the police, right? And so most people that know me don't know that person. They know a dance instructor. So a lot of people think that's what I do, right? So when I first met my wife, of course, met her at a dance party, and she asked me what I did for a living. And I looked at her and I said, "What do you mean?" She's like, "I know you aren't a dance instructor all the time. What do you do for a living?" I was like, "What do you think I do?" She was like, "I think you're a teacher." And I'm like, "What? What do you mean I'm a teacher?" She was like, "Your conversation, your demeanor, everything says that you're a teacher." And she wasn't the first person to say that. That just that day, I took it seriously, right? And so one of the things I realized about myself over the years is that I really was an educator. And so my mom was a teacher. I wasn't a fan of it then because she was a teacher at the school that I was at. So that whole thing, that was not fun. And so my whole perception of teachers was no. But after a while, I learned that I was constantly putting myself in positions where my way of helping people was to educate them about something. And so as a police officer, really as almost as soon as I got there, really when I was in my first academy, because I had to go to the academy twice, just the way the department works here. I realized that being in those positions to educate people about things or about how things really worked, that was what I really, really wanted, how I really wanted to impact our community, because there were relationships that were out of line. There were ideas about the police or ideas about the community on both sides of the line that people needed to be educated about. There needed to be some hard conversations a lot of times that either people didn't want to have or didn't have the words to articulate in a way that they could hear each other. And so my job as a police officer was, when I had the opportunities to educate citizens, I would educate citizens. This is how you interact with the police. If you want help, this is how you talk to them and tell them, this is what I need. By the same token, a lot of times officers got that chip on their shoulder, but they're taught that that's what they're supposed to have, or these kinds of people, this is how you interact with them to get what you want. So educate them about, no, this is how you interact with these people, because this is how they've been coerced, ain't the right word, but cultivated is the word I'll use, to believe this is what the police is or who the police is. And so if you want to be more effective, this is how you have to address them, right? And so being in that educator space is my why. You know, when it comes to dance instructing, I get a kick out of teaching people things that get them to places they'd like to be. People say, well, dance lessons, how does it do that? It teaches people to be more social. It teaches them how to build confidence. It teaches them how to interact. It develops their interpersonal skills. So it's the same job in a different space, and people see me differently because I have a different reputation there. But at the end of the day, being an educator is my why. And as long as I have that opportunity to manipulate communication that way, I think I'm doing a good job.
I love that. Yeah, you're very clear on it. When did you recognize that? Was it back when your now wife asked you that, or?
Actually, I understood that I enjoyed the process, but it wasn't until she said it, and I don't know why it was different then, that I realized why people kept seeing that in me. Because yeah, whatever, you know, before that. But when she said it, it seemed really sincere for some odd reason.
You guys
And
ended up
so
together
after
and
that,
married, so there
yeah,
must have
you
been
know,
something
she
there.
had she knew something. So
Give her some. We'll give her a little bit of
yeah, a little
credit.
bit. We'll give her a little bit.
Yeah, wives of police officers, man, they're a different breed as well.
Oh, no question. No
Yeah.
question. And it's funny. My son-in-law is a police officer. I think he's got 4 or 5 years on now. And so to see my daughter as his wife, but she understood the assignment before she got there.
Yeah.
And so it's I'm what's the word? I'm happy for him that he has someone who understands what he's living day to day. Who understands that you really don't know what this guy does, right? And so to have someone who could really speak into him and support him,
Mm.
it's cool.
Yeah.
It's cool. So
I
yeah.
have to say, like, I'm so grateful for my wife.
Oh yeah.
I got to that dark place. I got to that place where I was angry and pissed off at a lot of people because of things.
Yeah.
And I've told my story a lot, but
Yeah.
I'm grateful that our wives are the ones that keep us together. I'm grateful that my wife
Definitely.
she's openly says
Definitely.
that she's stubborn, and so that's why we're still together this day, even after all the shit I put her through.
Right, right.
But she didn't know what she was getting into. She was with me
Yeah.
before I went into law enforcement, and so she knew the real me, and so she could
Yeah.
see when I was changing, but I wouldn't listen. That was
Yeah.
the biggest problem. As I wouldn't listen, I
Yeah.
wouldn't communicate it, and
Yeah.
I think especially if you have somebody that's strong like that can get in, that you're willing to communicate. I think those are some pretty key things. How did you communicate with your wife? Because obviously you were a police officer already when you met. How many years
Right.
were you on at that stage?
I had 8 years on at that time.
8 years on, so you're pretty
Yeah.
pretty structured into it. Had a pretty
Pretty much.
yeah.
But I'm gonna tell you what was odd. One night she was well, we were laying in the bed sleep, right? And a a dream, you know, a memory popped up. Um, Off the top of my head, I can't remember what scene it was, but in the middle of the night, I jumped up and I guess whatever I did was enough to wake her up, or she was already up, one of the two, I don't know. Um, and she says, "What was that?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" She was like, "You just jumped up. The look on your face, what was that?" I was like, "Nothing. I'm good. I'm going back to sleep." She says, "Oh, hell no." Right? I need to know what that is.
Yeah.
And I was like, "It's nothing. I'm good." She was like, "No. Was that something from work?" I was like, "What do you mean? Was it something from work?" She says, "Were you at work in your dream?" Because I know that pop-up thing. And so I said, "Yes, I was at work and something happened. And that's why I jumped up." And so she was like, "Okay. Are you good for real though? Or you need to talk to somebody?" Right. And I'm like, "I'm good." She was like, "Can you tell me about it?" I was like, "No." You know what I mean? And she's like, "Will you ever tell me about that?" I said, I won't tell you about what just happened, but there will be days that I will tell you some things because your brain can handle those things. But I'm not going to tell you the things that are going to have you feel like I feel from time to time. And
Yeah.
so I think in that moment, she realized what this was, right?
Yeah.
And the cool part, she didn't hold it against me. She didn't overly dig. One of the coolest things, I realize it's a difficult thing for a spouse and a parent to do. When I would get home, she would give me and make the kids give me like 30 minutes where they didn't bother me, right? So I got, you know, when you come home, taking your uniform off is a process, right? Because you got all this shit you got to take off, number one. But then a lot of times, you're sweaty, depending on where you were at that day, it's a process of peeling those layers off, right?
Yeah.
And
depending on
so,
how that day ended, like
man,
how
you
the
know what I
day
mean?
ended, the last call is like
Yes,
you take that.
yes,
It's hard to let that stuff leave that stuff at work or even let
yes,
it go on your drive home. It can,
man.
yeah,
Because I would sit in my car because we would bring our squads home, right?
yeah.
So it's a really cool thing. So gas
Cool.
prices and all,
Two-edged sword. It's cool, but at the same time, it's like you don't actually you can't turn off until
don't
you
turn
get
it
home.
off.
Whereas I get a lot
Yeah,
of my clients to actually turn off when they walk out of the station, or they use that as an anchoring technique when you walk out of the
yeah.
station, or when you unzip your vest, or when you take all that stuff off. But if you're driving your patrol car home, you're on duty until you literally pull into the driveway.
From curb to curb,
Yeah.
right?
And then
And
your locker room is your bedroom.
exactly, right? So she would give me that space, right? Or I'd sit in the car for a while. Even then, I would walk in the house. They would still give me the half an hour, right? Or the kids would say, "Hey," and now toward the end of my career, my daughters weren't having it. It was, listen, we ain't got to talk, but I'm going upstairs with you, right? But they saw enough to say he needs this space.
Yeah.
And so we're gonna give him grace, is what I'll call it, to get from up under whatever it is, because we don't know what he saw today, right?
Just
And I
that
mean,
little
you
bit
had
of just that little bit of time to take your uniform off and have a
yeah,
shower and just kind of rinse
yeah,
it all away and be like,
man,
okay, cool. And then come out of the bedroom and be like, okay, cool. I'm dad now.
yeah. Well,
Or I'm
I
husband
had
now.
an acupuncturist, right? Because was going to acupuncture for a while, and he told me every day when you get home, 20-minute shower. And I'm like, what? He's like, 20-minute shower. He says, not hot, not cold, just warm enough. He said, wash all that shit off every day. And I'm like, come on, man. And the reality was that 20 minutes was amazing, because I knew I got my 30-minute spot. Then I had this 20-minute shower. When I would get out of shower, it was a new day,
Well, it's
you know?
from a neurolinguistic programming, like a neuroscience perspective.
Mm-hmm.
It's what they also call as an anchoring technique. So in NLP, it's
Oh,
called an
yeah.
anchoring technique. So you can do it with
Yeah.
a movement. You can do, cops do it all the time and they
Yeah.
don't realize it. You go to walk into a house and you've got that Superman pose and stance, shoulders
Yeah.
back,
Yeah.
chest up. I'm the
Yep.
man. Like, and you have that
Yep.
thinking. So it's all anchoring together. When you're having
Yeah.
that shower, it's like an anchoring release technique. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm flushing everything away, especially if you have a psyche to it. And
Yep.
as soon as that acupuncturist told you to do that, I guarantee your mind started to go to, this is letting me go. This is changing who
Yes.
I am. I'm flushing the
Yes.
cop away from it. I know cops
Yep.
that use the vest. I had an ambo driver that I was coaching for a while, and his was his door handle on his truck. So when he'd open the
Ah.
door handle on his truck at the station, when he go to get into it, that was his start to his release. And then his half-hour drive home was his
Yeah.
decompressing, whether it was listening to music, whether it was just kind of listening to
Yeah.
the road, and whatever it was that
Yeah.
decompression type side of stuff. I've used
Yeah.
motorcycles, and then I ride motorcycles a lot. So I use a motorcycle ride when I used to go to and from work on things. It would
Okay.
kind of be a bit of a decompression. So yeah, I
Oh
can
yeah.
totally get that. The shower,
Yeah.
just letting things rinse away, letting the day and the
Yeah.
trauma and the things of the day, along with everything else that you things that you had in place. It was that. And then all of a sudden now you're dad and husband, and
Yep.
yeah.
Yep. It made life a whole lot easier. It really did. That, and a buddy of mine who's a business mentor, says, start your day as soon as your day starts. Don't consume anything. Meditate.
Yeah.
And so 15 minutes, it was beautiful. Because granted, when I walk out of the door, my office is 20 feet away. So as soon as you get in that car, it's on, right? But it was cool to get cool before you got into that mode, because it's the weirdest thing. When you get in the car, your facial expressions change.
Yep.
Right. And so
Your whole body language changes as soon as you get
yeah.
as soon as you put that uniform on and you get in that vet. Like, for you
Yep.
being at home, the uniform probably didn't do it. For a lot of people to get ready at the station, the uniform will do it. It'll change their
Yeah.
persona. Or as soon as they walk into the briefing room, it's that
Yep.
persona changes, and they don't
Oh
even
yeah.
realize that they're doing it. And like you said, you
Yeah.
recognize as soon as you got into that patrol car, it was game
Yeah.
time.
Oh yeah.
I know some people that the start of their shift really isn't game time until they hop in the car and they drive out the station.
Yeah.
They drive out those
Exactly.
gates, and it's like, cool, we're game time.
Yeah.
It's
Yep.
a different persona as such.
Yep. Yep. So those couple of things, like I said, made it better. But my wife has really been an anchor. I get a wife.
Get a good wife.
Yeah, there you go. Get a good wife.
Yeah, get a good wife. Easier said than
Yeah.
done. But when you get one, you know it. My wife and I talk about it quite a bit, reflecting back on my policing career. And there's been times where I've
Yeah.
thought about going back to it. And we've talked about, like, what would we do if I went
Yeah.
back? And one of the biggest things that I said to her, because recently I actually really looked hardcore coming back to the US and joining law enforcement there.
Yeah.
And it's like, if I do this, we have to have a thing in place where maybe not every shift, or, if we have this unsaid thing that if I have had a bad day, I'm allowed to wake you up if it's the middle of the night. And if I
Yeah.
don't wake you up first thing in the morning, we talk about that last shift.
Yeah.
And I won't go into massive details in that, but I'll just be like, yep, cool, went to a job that involved this and this. Won't go into the details around it, but just we'll be like, and this is how it affected me.
Definitely.
Whether positive or negative. And just to let her know what page I'm on, because she can read me better than I can read myself half the time. And so she can be like, okay, I call bullshit on that. Like, I call bullshit, you're doing well because you've been this, this, and this. And I have to listen to her, and I have to acknowledge that and be like, okay, cool. Is that true or not? And those are like some of the key things. Did you do any of that kind of stuff with your wife, or did you guys have that?
You know what? There were times when I would, if something irritated me, that's when we would have those conversations. But irritation and bothering you is two different things. But if something irritated me, those times I would discuss it with her. One of the other things that it's one of the most invaluable things that a lot of officers don't do enough of, and that's find other like-minded officers and make it okay to talk to them and get honest feedback. Be willing to hear.
I think that's the key thing, because, we surround ourselves a lot of times with other officers. And sorry to interrupt, Dave, real quick, but
no, it's okay.
We surround ourselves with other officers, but I know, like, the officers that I used to surround myself, all we did was talk negative.
Yep.
And they're the worst officers to be around. They're actually horrible because they just make it worse.
Definitely.
A couple that I hung around with that were like, did that, like you were saying, did that, like-minded, positive, you're able to break things down.
Yes.
You can let shit go.
Yeah, man. Because one of the things, the last guy I worked with, right? Real straight shooter, right? Younger guy, still got a lot of years to do. He always asked, and he would always say, I got to ask you a question. I was like, okay. He says, I want the real cop answer. I don't tell me, don't tell me what I want to hear. Right. And that was the best attitude to have, because he would say, listen, I feel like this, and this. Am I looking at this wrong? Or is there another way that I could look at this? Right. And it was like he opened the door for me to tell him what I really thought. You know what I mean? And I think as police officers, if we get out of that space of the decision I made was the decision, I based it on this statute and this general order and this, no one gives a fuck, right? Sometimes you need someone to call your shit, right? And not to say you're a bad person or it's time to feel bad. I'm just giving you some feedback so you can let the other part go. You know what I mean? And it's not to say that I got the right answer, right? But it is to say that sometimes there's another way to perceive it or think about it that can cause you to think and become a better officer going forward. We're human beings. It's just like raising kids, right? You don't know if you're raising them right. You don't know that till later. You're trusting, what did you put in a good effort? right? Did you really try to do the best you could do with the information you had at the time? If that's the case, you can't beat yourself up if it's the wrong thing or it wasn't the perfect thing. But allow yourself to hear that there may have been another way. And then, next time, now you've got information, because you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And so if you got a guy or two that, and usually it's the guy who don't work with you, right? It's the guy on another shift in another district or another, and so you're giving yourself that option of having a sounding board, right? And you can really talk to that person, because us cops, no one understands us but us. If you've never done the job, shut up. You don't know what this is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the reality is, sometimes you got to give yourself that space. Like I said, there are times where I talk to my wife, but sometimes I would call, I've got a couple of higher ups. We've been friends my entire career, or our entire careers, right? And we'd have a conversation and say, man, Dave, it wasn't, that's not how I would have done it. All right, how would you have done it?
Yeah.
Okay, what do you see that I didn't see? When they say, well, you said blah, 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 blah. That ain't how you go into that. Or that's how I would. And you get to put a mirror up.
Yeah.
I think that's something we need to take more advantage of.
I think that's amazing. We see it all the time in business. You see business people doing it. We met because of a mutual, a good friend of mine, and he helps people with masterminds. And masterminds are all about that, leveling people up, leveling each other up. And the people do it in business all the time. I do think that it's something that we could, policing need to bring into there, so that you can level up and learn. And we do some of it. And like yourself, you did a lot of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's real important. I wanted to before we wrap up, I did want to talk about the last few years in Chicago around different stuff. How did you get involved a lot with the riots and that were going on, or
we got called out and held over, over shifts and pulled into different areas where looting and so forth was going on. I will say that was one of the scariest times. And not just because I could have gotten hurt or other guys could have gotten hurt. It was more about, it was young people, right? And a lot of times it's difficult to understand young people because they don't understand themselves, right? Or they're reacting or acting off of all of these negative influences that exist out here that push them to do certain things. And then we say, well, they know better. Not everyone knows better, right? And so the scariest part for me was being in this position where I might have to hurt a kid. You know what I mean? Or someone's gonna, have me on camera doing something and they didn't see the part that happened right before that. Or, we're just here to protect the people who really worked hard to build some things and to keep you from fucking it up. Right. And you're tired because you work 16 hours today. And those aren't the best conditions to be asked to do what we do, right? Because you work your beat and then you get pulled and now you're going into this area that you don't really know, right? And so those were the things that were scary. And then you're talking about different police departments interacting and working together. Every police department has its own way of doing things and attitudes and what have you. That was rough, like I said, being in Chicago proper, doing that, it was a different animal, right? But, putting on gear and all that stuff, that's when nothing's even happening and you're on 10, right? And you're maintaining that, and you got family calling, is everything okay? Even as I've got, been, the senior guys don't always get the call. The new guys get the call first, right? So there have been a lot of times where my son-in-law gets the call, or he's regularly working double shifts, no off days. All of that stuff is super, super tough to do. And no one's saying thank you. They're saying you don't have a choice. I don't think people realize the police department, we have, collective bargaining in the whole 9 yards and unions in the whole 9 yards. We don't get to strike. We don't get to not show up, right? And that added pressure, all of those things, especially during that time period, you just want it to be over, because it feels like a war zone. And then you've got politicians who on the fly calling your boss, and then your boss is calling commanders call lieutenants call sergeants calling you to tell you everything you thought you were supposed to do. Don't do none of that, right? And then that changes in 5-6 hours, right? So it was a really confusing time as a police officer, because you're trying to figure out what's the right thing to do, what's the right thing to say. Do you put hands on someone? Do you not? And a lot of it, you felt useless, because a big part of it was let it happen. So it's as far as
then you got beat up for that one, because then the public, media, and everybody like, you cops aren't doing anything. And
it's like,
I remember hearing because I've got a friend who lived in downtown Chicago on the other side of the bridge. And she actually, when the bridges got raised, she couldn't get out, and there was people. She lived above like a mall, and people were breaking into the malls, and she was worried. She was worried they were going to be getting up into her apartment and all. And she's like, the cops aren't doing anything. And then I heard on the media, the cops weren't allowed to arrest people. I'm like,
no, it's we've had several situations where young kids get on social media and plan riotous acts, even today, right? I watched a video earlier today of something that happened over the weekend, or maybe not over the weekend. It's still the weekend, day before yesterday. And they literally took over an area where people are driving in their cars. They're destroying cars. It's a crazy mind stretch is what I'll call it, right? That you're asked to be in, and not, granted, they're kids, but at some point it's got to come to a head, right? But you're told, no, just hold off, just wait. But there are people who are being traumatized by these people, right? And it's not right. But at the same time, there's certain rules we got to follow. Because, we don't call the shots. a lot, I don't think most people don't know your local politicians are the ones who call the shots for your police department, right? It's not us. We pull the string, they pull the strings on what we do and how we do it, right? And so if the public doesn't like that, I'm not saying don't tell me about it. You know what I mean? It's not that I don't care, but you elected these people to make the rules for you.
Yeah.
And our hands are tied a lot of the times. Would I like to go tossing kids left and right? Sure, why not? Right? But if we did that, right? How many parents are going to say, why were you doing that to my kid?
Yeah.
Well, if you took care of that, I wouldn't have to. Right? That's number one. But that's all those, having to juggle all those different things for me is traumatic in itself,
Oh, hell yeah.
especially for police officers.
Oh, hell
Because
yeah.
you don't know
The
what to
amount of
do.
cops that I know that like they
Yeah.
literally went not and they put the badge up and they put the vest away and handed the gun in because they were like,
Yeah.
I can't deal with this anymore. How did you deal with
Yeah.
it, Dave? Like, how did you get through it? Because like you said, it's still going on, just not to the
Yeah.
level that it was during those times,
Right.
but it's still going on and it's going to happen again. So how did you deal with that for like people like your son-in-law and for
Right.
the cops coming through now and the cops that are still out there doing the great job that they're doing? How did you work through that and stay and come out the other side okay?
The weird part is I knew I was close enough to retire soon.
Okay. Okay. Hey, and that's a valid thing for the people that are, within that 5 year kind
Yeah.
of thing. It is that
Yeah.
is a focus, and it kind of it's like going for a long run. You get to the
It,
last,
yeah.
2/3 of it,
Yeah.
last quarter of it. You're like, hey, I can keep doing this for this little bit longer. I can keep doing it. But
and really, that was my encouragement. As crazy as that sounds, that was my encouragement. There was a goal, right?
Mm.
Granted, a lot of cops don't have that option,
No.
right? And so the other part is forgiving yourself for not being able to do the things that you believe you need to do.
Yeah.
Because for a lot of us, we get caught up in what we believe we're supposed to do. Right. And when we can't do those things, frustration sets in. When we can't do those things, disappointment sets in. Sometimes we're even embarrassed, right? That for whatever reason, I couldn't help. And think, here's the yuckiest part. I don't know a police department anywhere where you as a police officer can speak out about police policy. Right? So in the middle of getting stoned to death by the community, by media, by people who were wronged some kind of way, right? You can't even say, I wanted to, but I couldn't because this guy told me not to, right? And so we have to get to a place as police officers that we realize we're not going to be able to help all the time. And we have to forgive ourselves for not being able to do that. Not that we did anything wrong, but that a lot of times we take these oaths, and a lot of people don't realize how serious guys are when they put that badge on, when they raise their hand, right? And it's necessary for us to realize we agreed to be Superman, right? But you don't always get to wear that cape. And when you don't, be okay with that. And be okay with the thought that people aren't going to understand. But when you can be there, when you can show up at your best. And it honestly, I mean, granted, retirement was the one thing, but it was also the other side of understanding that I couldn't be everything that I thought needed to be or needed to happen. And I had to get okay with that. But that also goes back to having someone to share things with. Yeah. Sometimes it helps having those conversations, if for no other reason than to get the scream out. Yeah. Right. And so really cut yourself some slack. It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that pillow is really good to scream into sometimes.
Oh man, definitely.
And when you're riding around in a patrol car on your own, hey, you screaming out loud in the middle of nowhere.
Yes,
it's really therapeutic. Yes. The other thing I'd add on to there, as well is remember that it's not going to last forever.
True. That's the other part.
History shows us it doesn't last forever.
Yes.
Sometimes it lasts for a long time. It lasts for a few years, but sometimes it's only 5 minutes. It's not.
That's really, really good.
And
Chris,
that kind of goes into
point.
it goes in line with the, oh, retirement's not here, because you're like, oh, well, when I retire, it definitely is over. Like, I don't have to
Yeah,
do this stuff anymore.
exactly.
And so
Exactly.
it's not going to last forever. Just remember
No.
that. Dave,
Yeah.
thanks so much for today.
It's a
Anything else
pleasure.
you'd like to add, or any last kind of words that you'd like to give?
Um, Stay vigilant. Stay encouraged. Seek peace. Choose to see the best in people, even when they aren't in the best place in their lives. Seek opportunities to identify with people, even if you don't know anything about their background or the life that they've lived. And grant yourself grace, grant yourself forgiveness, and grant yourself peace. And you can do 25, 30 years, whatever you got to do to get that pension, and kick your heels up and sleep as long as you want.
Catch up on all that sleep that you missed during
Oh,
the
yeah.
job.
Oh, man.
Those 16-hour days, man.
Exactly.
When I was doing
Nothing like
protections.
working midnights.
We do rotating, so we do earlys, lates, and nights here. So we do all three in a
Ooh.
set of shifts. And it used to be a 5-week roster, so you do like multiple days of earlys, then multiple of lates, and multiple of nights. Like at the time, we'd do 7 nights in a row, then you get 6 days off.
That's
And
brutal.
yeah, so I actually don't mind it because you get a good variety of all. You don't have to just do midnights or just do
Yeah.
overnights. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, so we did that. But then when I was on protection services, we used to do, like, it was when we were on operation looking after the prime minister, and that wasn't uncommon. It's different now, but it wasn't uncommon to
Yeah.
be doing 16 to 19-hour days and then be back at work 9 hours later. If you were
It's rough.
lucky, sometimes you'd be like,
Yeah.
you'd stay with whatever diplomat you were looking after, and you'd only get like
Right.
5 hours of sleep, and then you'd be back up. Yeah, you do that for like a week or 2 weeks sometimes, and then you'd take a week off, and you'd be like, nah, I'm not
Yeah.
coming into the office because I'm not
Yeah.
operational.
Wow.
And so you take some time off, or you use some of that time that you accrued over that time. But
Wow.
last question I have for you, Dave, and I always
Yeah.
wrap this up with this question: what's your top tip
Okay.
to self-happiness?
Forgiving yourself for not being perfect. That's it. That's it. If you can get over the idea that failure is a problem, or you can get past the idea that you have to be at some perceived level, you're doing okay. Believe that you're good enough. And that isn't about a measuring stick. It's about understanding that whatever value you bring to the table is still value. And that value can impact in amazing ways that you've never even considered it being. So give yourself that grace. I know I use that a lot, but it's one of the things that over time that I've learned in both my law enforcement career and also in business. Once I started to realize that I bring something to the table, and the fact that I have something to bring to the table, and stop measuring it to what someone else is bringing. Realize if it's just a penny worth of anything, if you keep bringing a penny's worth, over time, it's going to compound. Be okay that that penny is quality. Make it a quality penny. And over time, it'll increase because we're all good enough. Just bring what you got to the table.
Love it.
That's it.
I love it. So there you go, guys. Now remember, just take one thing away from today. I mean, there's so many good, as I call them, nuggets that are in there. There's so many good nuggets that Dave gave today that we talked about, that we did. I'll recap the 3 things that Dave dropped for us today, so you can just take one. If you're like, oh my God, there's so many things here, I'm looking for that one. 3 things to counter the burnout. Be friendly to a kid. Find a kid somewhere, go to a school, just find a kid, stop the patrol car, get out, have a conversation with them, and just say hi. remember that why. Remember that deep why of why you're here. And if you're struggling with that, reach out. We'll help you get it. And everybody can't do this job, guys. Remember that. You are one of the elite by just doing this job. Take that as it is and actually, be sacred about it. So those are the three things. Thanks again, Dave, for being here. Appreciate you taking the
My
time.
pleasure.
Appreciate your service. Thanks for everything you did for the community where you worked, and also the officers that you helped out. This is Fight the Burnout. If you want to get in touch with us, you can go to Create From Why. That's WHY, Create From WHY at .com, or you can email us at createfromwhy@gmail.com is probably the easiest way. You can get in touch with us. We can have a conversation. If you want to be on the app, if you want to be on the show, if you're a first responder, police officer, military, we'd love to interview you, have a conversation. But till next time, my motto is train hard, test easy. That's both physically and mentally, because we are going to be tested as first responders. So may as well train for it and make it a little bit easier. Just by listening to this episode, you have done that. Make sure you share, like, subscribe, all those fun things. And till next time, stay safe, and we'll talk to you soon.